Good afternoon, fellow Plexers. Today I'm going to do a video for a new Plex server owner who may not know the relationship that bitrate plays in relation to file sizes and even resolution. And specifically, I can address two different posts in the Plexaholics Facebook group with this issue. First off, Brian has users who can play movies fine, but shorter episodes buffer. And then Chance, he has a musical that will only play buffer free if he transcodes it. And what I'm going to try to explain it with is this video that I can play because it's public domain. I have 3 different versions in a test regular movie library on my older Synology NAS that's powered by, I think it's an 8th gen Celeron processor. The iGPU in that Celeron processor is a HD 500 graphics iGPU. Slightly newer Synology models have a UHD graphics 600, which is very comparable to the UHD 630 that's in most 8th through 10th gen iGPUs, and that's to help with hardware accelerated transcoding. I also have 2 4K versions of this same movie. So what we're going to do, we're going to play all the versions, but first you can see these are around 400 megabits in size. This one is 928. And these 2 4K versions are between 8 and 900 megabits per second. So I'm going to show that size really doesn't have a lot to do with bit rate or even resolution. It all depends on what encoder was used and how high or low the settings were to compress information inside the media container file. So to start off, I've got a little word processor document going, and just video bitrate is the amount of information in a video that's processed and sent per second. It's a fundamental measure of video quality and is usually measured in bits per second. So I've simply got the partial titles of each of these files with their size already here, and I just want to put the bit rate in front of each one after we test it. So I'll be doing that off screen. So I have the web app open with dashboard set for this older server, and I have the Plex HTPC client app, and I have 2 different movie libraries. So the 4K one with 2 versions, one with the edition tag of 4K and one with an edition tag of 4K AV1. And then in the regular library, I have one with the edition tag 720p, one 1080p, and one with the edition tag of 1080p AVI. So let's start with this one. And I'm using this because I can show it without worrying about a YouTube copyright strike. All right, so if we play this one, and let me go back to, so it's this one. We play that, it's an 11 megabit per second stream. So let me put that in my little word processor document. All right, now let's play the 1080p. So this 1080p copy has a 12 megabit per second stream. Slightly higher for a larger resolution video. Okay, so now let's play the one that's in the AVI file. Now this one has 26 megabits per second. That means there's more quality packed into it, even though it's an older file format. Most people don't think of using an AVI these days, but you can pack a higher or lower compression into any media container file when you encode it yourself. Okay, so now let's go to the 4K library. And this is the 4K version. Let's see. It's this one. It is an MKV file. So now we have 30 megabits per second inside that. All right, and lastly, we'll do the one that's encoded with AV1, which is a newer protocol than H.265, which was newer than H.264. So this one is 14 megabits per second. Well, let's leave that playing for a second. So basically, if you're new to Plex, when you are playing something on your server or someone else's remotely, one of your users, you can start up the Plex web app on any device. All it needs is a web browser, and you can load it at app.plex.tv. And when something is playing, this activity window opens up, or it doesn't open up, it becomes yellow. And if you click on it, you can go to the dashboard, and let's expand that. And you'll want to expand the details right here, show details. And this tells me that I'm playing off this HTPC client app under Linux with a Pop! OS operating system. It shows my local IP address. If it's a remote stream, it would show your user's external IP address, and in a screenshot, you should mask that info out. It shows the bit rate. It tells me that it's a 4K video directly playing to the client device and that the audio is unknown. So let's go back and pick the other 4K stream. We see that's unknown audio also. So let's go into our regular movie library or the test library, and we'll play the 720p version. And you can see this is DTS 5.1 audio. And this 1080p version is unknown audio again. And this 1080p in the AVI container format is also unknown audio. So you can tell a lot about what's going on with your server. So for Brian, I would check dashboard, and if your episodes have a significantly high bit rate, your remote users may not be able to have the bandwidth to have that work buffer free. Plex should convert it by transcoding, but that would require you to have hardware acceleration enabled on your server, and that comes from a Plex Pass, and it comes from either a capable NVIDIA GPU or a Intel iGPU. So you would go to the transcoder settings once you had a Plex Pass, and you would see done under hardware transcoding device, you would see auto, but you can click into it to see the device you're using. So this server has an older iGPU. It's still got some capability. And you'd want to use hardware acceleration when available. And the rub is, if you're using Windows and you have an older Intel iGPU or older Intel processor, do not check enable hardware tone mapping unless your processor is at least an 11th gen mobile version of an Intel processor with an iGPU or a 12th gen desktop processor. There is no hardware tone mapping under Windows for older processors. And if you do enable this, it'll force a transcode to be off the CPU itself, which is very resource intensive. So you could unintentionally make it harder to stream to remote users by checking this on an older processor trying to gain hardware acceleration. And this is a Windows specific issue. It doesn't affect Plex running under Linux. And we can demonstrate that too. So let's go back to our dashboard. And let's go back into the 4K library. Or hold on, let's do this first. Let's not worry about 4K or 1080p. Let's pick the highest bitrated version, which is either this or that. So this is a 4K version, and this is a 1080p in the AVI container format. So let's actually use this 4K because that's where I've got the higher bit rate, 30 megabits per second. Okay, so let's start this stream up, and we're showing that it's 30 megabits per second. So if I drop down and I go to where it says HD, I'm going to force it in a 4 megabit per second 720p transcode. And that's what we have. And now we see the HW here and the HW there to signify a hardware transcode. And now you see the bit rate drop down to 4 megabit per second, and that didn't really take too long to start up. But I have great local networking infrastructure here. This PC is hardwired. I have Cat6 cables run to a 1000 megabit per second capable switch that feeds into my router, and I have gig files fiber service. So both outside or to the outside I have great connectivity, and then within my local network I have great connectivity. Actually, let's put this stream back into direct play. And you see how it took a second or two to start up transcoded. On a more modern iGPU, it would start just as fast as the original video does. So let's go back into our Plex settings. And now we'll turn off the hardware acceleration options, and I'll turn off tone mapping, and I'll save the changes. All right, so now we're back to the dashboard. Let's start the stream up. Now, Plex can direct stream off from a potato. It doesn't take much power to get a direct Plex stream to any client device. As long as you have the bandwidth, you're fine. So now let's force this into a software transcode. We'll do the same 4 megabits per second, 720p. So you see it's taken longer to start. And it just buffered after it started. And now it buffered a second time. And it buffered again. So there's no HW to signify the transcode. We still have a 4 megabit per second transcode. Whether it's hardware accelerator or not doesn't determine this. We chose that. We chose 720p at 4 megabits per second. And now you would think almost any system could software transcode one stream. But this older Intel processor, which would be equivalent to a 7th gen Intel processor, can't handle a simple 30 megabit per second software transcode. There's nothing wrong with the way I installed Plex. It's simply not built for this. All right, so let's see what else we can do. Let's bring this back in. And let's try the AV1. That may be difficult I'm not really sure whether this newer protocol will have an effect or not. But let's try that anyway with a software transcode. So this will be direct stream. Oh no, that's in a software transcode. Let's put it back to the original. All right, so I'm not following a script. I kind of wing this. Let's do this. Maybe I started the wrong video. So that's a direct play. Let's put that into a 4 megabit per second transcode and see if it buffers. All right, buffering at start. Okay, so it's still buffering. So it really doesn't matter how it's encoded, whether it's the AV1 or whether it's, let's see what the encode is on this, H.264. They're both buffering because without the hardware acceleration, Plex can't handle it. Or not really Plex. My CPU can't handle it. Again, this is a 8th gen Celeron processor. So let's go back into the 1080p versions and the 720p. Let's start lower. Let's try to transcode this 720p one. All right, I'm looking. I think this had the 11 megabits per second. It seems to be transcoding fine, and it's already in a transcode, so I don't quite know about that. I thought the addition tag feature was supposed to treat these uniquely. All right, let's try this one. This one is an HEVC, which is really H.265. We're direct playing. Let's put it into the same transcode. Okay, and we're still a software transcode that started up without an initial buffer. And it seems to be playing fine. So now let's do the one in the AVI container. All right, this is starting up in a transcode. I've learned something new. These additions, the different additions will follow the transcoding setting of a different version. This is kind of wild information. So this one's playing fine too. Put it back into direct stream. So it looks like, just off the cuff, that a 26 megabit per second 1080p transcode to 720p is easily able to be handled by this older Celeron processor. Jumping up the bitrate just 4 numbers to 30 megabit per second, but now it's a 4K version, that will buffer with a software transcode on this older CPU. All right, so again, let's go back to the server. And this is why hardware acceleration is so important if you're sharing your server with friends and family. Your outgoing bandwidth to the internet is also very important. All right, so I've got that set again. Let's go back to dashboard. And let's try those 4K streams again. So direct play is no issue. Now we'll put it into a transcode off the iGPU. Does take a second or two to start up. All right, and again, we're buffering on this. But the buffers aren't as long as they were. Let me just double check this again. Oh, I missed one checkbox. Use hardware accelerated video encoding. Save the changes. So I don't mind messing up, because if I mess up, it'll show you that you might too. And it's always good to double check. All right, so we'll resume that. And now it appears we're buffer free off this older iGPU. Again, it's the HD 500 graphics. It's not even a UHD one. Let's take it out of transcode, and let's test our last 4K video. So direct play at 14 megabits per second. And you would assume, based on that, without the iGPU being involved, that just based on the bit rate that we could have transcoded this off the CPU, but that wasn't true. Right now, without me understanding why this one's not working too well. But again, I guess I should understand it. I don't think there's any ability on this older Intel processor or its iGPU to handle AV1. So that's the issue right there. This one is too much for it, so this one needs to direct stream. And it plays fine. So I could throw this movie on my regular server, which has an 11th gen mobile Intel processor with the Iris Xe iGPU, and that can handle the AV1 encoded files easily. So that's something to consider too. If you think you want to use a new protocol to compress your videos to get more quality in a smaller space, you're going to need a newer CPU and iGPU from Intel to do it. Now, this hardware accelerated transcoding is also available off the NVIDIA GPU. This PC I'm using right now has a Asus 12 gigabyte 3060 NVIDIA card in it, and I use it for Handbrake on this desktop. I do have a test Plex server installed on another M.2 on this system. I can boot into Ubuntu, and that's a very, very capable GPU. It's about equivalent with an 11th gen mobile iGPU or a 12th gen desktop iGPU from Intel. All right, so I hope this kind of explains the relationship of file size, resolution, bit rate, and least we forget how a video is encoded. H.264, H.265/HEVC, they're the same thing. MPEG, that's a different encoder also. And if we go here, we have H.264 for 4K. And AV1. AV1 is going to require a newer Intel processor, an iGPU, and to be honest with you, I'm not sure of the capabilities of NVIDIA cards where an AV1 is supported versus an AV1 encoded file isn't supported. So just general information for a new Plex server owner. And I hope this allows Brian to understand how to troubleshoot his problem. It's probably related to bitrate and or how it's encoded. And then Chance, he can do the same thing. He can check the dashboard to see what's showing up. And if something plays when it's transcoded, that usually means the bit rate's too high in the original stream. And last but not least, I can right click on any media file. My custom filebot expression adds this extra media characteristics into the file name. So I can just look and tell you what it is. But if you're not using my custom filebot expressions, you can open a file up with media info and get media characteristics about it this way. Media info being installed alongside filebot is why I can put those descriptive things into my file names. So if we look on the video portion, you get a lot of information here. And I actually don't use this too often. I'm looking for H264. Oh, right here. Took me a second. I'm leading into the monitor. So you can use media info installed under a Windows system, a Linux system, or a Mac to examine what your files are. Or follow one of my FileBot videos. In almost all my FileBot videos, I post all my custom expressions in the description of the video if you want to name your files this way to be very descriptive. Okay, thanks for watching and happy plexing.